Good morning and welcome to Cloud on Air, Google Cloud's live weekly webinar series where you can hear from product experts, engineers, customers, and even sustainability enthusiasts like us. My name is Chris Talbott. I'm in the product marketing organization at Google Cloud.
And my name is Anna Escuer, and I'm part of the data center sustainability team.
And we're going to be talking about sustainability today, specifically what do cloud providers like Google do to reduce the environmental impact of their operations? And then what does that do for our customers and our developers in improving their own sustainability posture when they use our cloud? You can ask questions live in the platform at any time. There's Googlers behind the scenes that will answer them, or we'll address the questions at the end of the session. You ready to go?
Let's get started.
All right. Why building on an environmentally responsible cloud matters? And the reason that Anna and I are really here today from a sustainability perspective and from a Google Cloud perspective is sustainability is one of the core values across Google from the beginning. Actually, embedded in one of our mission statements is this idea that we want to work to empower everyone from governments to businesses to enterprises to individuals to use Google technology in a way that they can make the world a more sustainable place. And when you think about that challenge and that mission statement, it's really more important than ever before. Because whoever you are, whether you're a government or a business or individuals, we are all facing an incredible challenge when it comes to improving our sustainability and reducing the impact on the environment. So the Earth is warming at an alarming rate due to increasing greenhouse gas emissions. And we're seeing the impact of that in the environment in the form of melting ice caps and desertification and more volatile weather that we've been experiencing. Right. And we're also using resources at an alarming rate. So in 2017, the demand for resources was 1.7 times the amount that the Earth can actually sustain. So this idea, this linear economy, which you're going to address a little bit in the context of data centers,
yes.
This linear economy idea where we extract resources, we use them, and then we just waste them, we're very quickly coming to a point where we're going to hit limits in terms of the resources that we need to use and the reduction of those resources. So when we think about becoming more sustainable in our operations, is really kind of two sides of a coin. It's one, can we be more efficient and reduce the amount of resources that we use? And then two, can we transition to low or zero carbon energy solutions in order to power our operations?
Right.
And across Google, from our hardware teams to the buildings that our employees work in, to the data centers that support everything from search to ads to YouTube to all of our customers on Google Cloud Platform and G Suite, we're trying to reduce our environmental impact. And today we're going to talk about the data center portion of that. And this is a critically important portion of that story. So we all know, especially the audience on this webinar who are using cloud tools, the use of computing resources is growing exponentially, triple digits year over year. Yep. And millions of people are coming online, new users are coming online every single month. And all of this computing power is supported at the end of the day by data centers, whether it's a data center in your closet of your startup, or it's the hyperscale huge facilities that companies like Google or Amazon or Microsoft use to support all of their customers. And because the computational need is growing, so have the data centers. And it's grown to, some estimates have it about 2% of the world's electricity usage. So this is obviously a major opportunity for us in order to power these data centers and use resources for these data centers more efficiently to reduce the environmental impact. And data centers in particular have proven to be an area where innovation has amazing impact. So between 2000 and 2005, electricity usage in data centers grew 90% annually. Yep. So incredible amounts. But from 2010 to 2014, it only grew 4%. And that's largely due in part to the technology innovation, but also because sort of the transition and the advent of these hyperscale cloud providers that can use electricity in a far more efficient manner.
Yes. And
So-
we'll cover efficiency afterwards.
Yeah, definitely. We'll get back into that. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is, data centers in particular, and then the cloud, represents a huge opportunity for us to reduce the environmental impact and for our customers to reduce their own environmental impact. So I want to kind of double down on the idea of where the cloud in particular and Google Cloud fits into the story. And it kind of requires that we go back a little bit to where Google started. So as we saw our business growing and it being a digital-first business growing exponentially, we saw that we needed energy to power that business that made sense both from an environmental perspective and a business perspective, which was one of the reasons why we focus on renewable energy purchases that you're going to talk about. And we've seen our business grow exponentially, and the computing resources that we need to fuel our business grow exponentially. And yeah, not everyone is supporting 7 billion or 7 apps with 1 billion users each, like Google is, but everyone is transforming or revolutionizing their business in some form factor in a digital way and changing their IT infrastructure that supports those businesses. And as they do that, it's really hard to get access to clean energy and really hard to get access to the efficiencies that a cloud provider can provide. So what ends up happening, and what we believe will happen into the future, is that companies like Google and Amazon and Microsoft and all the various co-location providers and other technology companies, we're actually going to be part of the solution if companies and customers and developers want to get access to clean energy and want to be more sustainable in what they do. So essentially, cloud can help you be a more sustainable business or be a more sustainable engineer or developer on one of our platforms. Now, when I take the word sustainable cloud and break that down, it basically, we think about it in these sort of 3 buckets of areas. And this, we're going to talk about it in the Google context, but this probably applies to any cloud provider out there. So the first area is ensuring that you're being as efficient as possible in using resources within the data center, both energy and the actual physical resources that we use, like servers and the waste that makes. Second area, which is critically important, is renewable energy and ensuring that you are focused on getting to zero or low cost carbon solutions. And then finally, I mentioned the linear economy needs to change based on how much the Earth can support. So we need to transition to a circular economy and reduce the amount of waste that is eventually hitting a landfill. So let's talk about the first area and creating the smartest data centers that we possibly can. So Google is known for having some of the most efficient data centers in the world, oftentimes measured at 50% more efficient than your average data center. And when you think about efficiency in a data center context, a lot of times you hear the term PUE, or power usage effectiveness. So keep me honest here, Anna. This is basically all the extra stuff you have to use beyond computing.
Right, so PUE, as Chris said, stands for Power Usage Effectiveness. And it's the industry-wide metric that we use to assess the efficiency of a data center. It is calculated by the ratio of the total energy that you use at your data center divided by the energy used only for computing, for the IT equipment. So in an ideal world, you would want all your energy consumed just for the IT equipment, but that is virtually impossible. You would always need some overhead, like cooling, ventilation, the lights have to be on, etc. So it's virtually impossible to get to PUE equal 1. But the goal is to get to a PUE that is the closest to 1 that you can. And at Google, since we first started building our data centers, that was a main focus for us because we wanted to, the most sustainable energy that you use is the energy that you don't use, right? So reducing that overhead to a minimum is a goal that we have been working very hard to, and our PUE has been on a 12-month trailing average of 1.1. And just for comparison purposes, the average data center out there has a PUE of 1.7. So that's a massive difference in the amount of energy that our data centers consume compared to the average.
Yeah, it's great. And what's the difference between 1.1 1.12.
So the two colors in this chart are the differences between the seasons. So in summertime, you need way more cooling than you would need in wintertime. So that's why you see those peaks throughout the seasons. But what really matters is the trailing average over the last 12 months that averages out all the differences in the seasons.
Great, thanks for the explanation.
Yeah,
and we continue to focus on this and report on these metrics all
the
time.
We report on these metrics, and we have even a project with DeepMind to optimize PUE through machine learning. So we continuously look for opportunities and for new technologies to optimize our energy consumption.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. So data centers in general, they're kind of tricky beasts in that the environment's incredibly dynamic. A model for a cooling system doesn't apply to another system, and data centers are unique from data center to data center. So this idea that you can use learning networks in particular to achieve additional improvements in data center efficiency is a great way where some of the other work within Google is translating into how efficient we can be in our data centers.
One of our engineers had the great idea of trying machine learning in our data centers, and DeepMind got involved, and it was a great learning experience where we were able to reduce 40% of our cooling energy just by using machine learning.
Yeah. And that's one of the areas where we innovate. But when you think about all of the areas that contribute to data center efficiency and reducing that eventual overhead, there's other areas of innovation across our data centers. In particular, in some of our data centers where we've located, like Finland, where we've located the data center next to water resource, the Gulf there, so we can cool with seawater, and other areas like only manufacturing the parts of the servers that we actually need, none of the superfluous components, are all areas where Google's innovated in order to increase the efficiency of our data centers.
Correct. It's not only adjusting the amount of energy that we use after building the data center, is where we build the data center, how we use the natural resources that are available in the area, how we can optimize before even spending those resources and that energy.
Now, being as efficient as possible in using energy is a key component, but sourcing the right kind of energy is as much, if not more, of the equation.
Totally right. So at Google, we love moonshots. And back in 2012, we decided that we would match 100% of our consumption with renewable energy. Back in the day, we didn't really know how we would do it, but only 5 years later, we achieved this amazing milestone. So last year in 2017, 100% of the megawatt hours that we consumed for our global operations, and that includes data centers, offices, everything that we run, was matched with megawatt hours of renewable energy. And that is kind of complicated, so I'm gonna cover how we do it and why it matters and how we got there. So depending on how you generate your electricity, your carbon or greenhouse gas emissions are going to be completely different. So depending on whether you're fueling a gas power plant or a coal power plant, or you're using renewables to generate that megawatt hour, the amount of greenhouse gases are going to be completely different, right? So generating 1 megawatt hour with a coal burning plant versus a windmill is completely different. However, once the electricity hits the grid, there is no way to differentiate the electrons that were generated in a coal power plant versus a windmill. And that is because how grids function. And so if you are a electricity user that is hooked into the grid, as we all are, there is no way that you can differentiate the type of electricity that you get from the grid. It's all the electrons are the same. So a number of years ago, there was this mechanism that was created to track the renewable energy attributes of the megawatt hours that were in the grid. And those are called renewable energy certificates, also commonly known as RECs. So every time 1 megawatt hour of electricity is generated, one REC, one unique REC is also generated in such a way that you can track the generation with these certificates. So that is the way that we are able to track, even though we're hooked into the grid and we get the power from the grid, we're able to track all the renewable energy that we're getting. So last year, we finally matched 100% of our electricity consumption with renewable uses, and we have that amount of renewable energy credits RECs on our portfolio. What this means...
So real quick, on the 100% match, that means that we have purchased energy, or renewable energy has been produced somewhere, enough to equal everything that we've consumed as a company.
Correct.
Right?
The concept of matching is an intermediate solution for what we would like for the long term. So what basically happens is that a data center has to run 24/7. And a cloud customer, we can tell them, oh, sorry, the wind isn't blowing. We can serve you. That would never work. So we still need the grids. There are currently no technologies that can source 100% of the time renewable energy to serve 100% of the time the needs of electricity that we have, right? So the way that we got to 100% was ensuring that we were matching 100% of our consumption with renewable that was generated in the grids where we operate or elsewhere. That is not the perfect solution, but at Google, we like moonshots. And so we are constantly looking for opportunities to make that 100% renewable goal 100% of the time, 24/7. We'll get there.
Yeah.
So what this means for you as a cloud customer, when you run on Google Cloud, 100% of the electricity that is consumed on your behalf is actually matched with renewable energy. So 100% of renewable energy match, this means that we buy a lot of renewable energy, correct? So Google is the largest purchaser of renewable energy in the world. Last month, we published that we're around 3 gigawatts of renewable energy, and that makes us almost over 2x the next purchasers on renewable energy. And as we said, we talked about matching and what it means. And at Google, we like to innovate. And innovation, it also comes not only for the products or the great tools that we build, but it also comes for the way that we source renewable energy. So we have partnered with a number of entities, utilities, project developers, et cetera, to bring new power into the grid. So these RECs, the renewable energy certificates that we mentioned, are available on the market. You can buy them off the shelf. But that wouldn't be for us additional, and that wouldn't be bringing new renewable generation into the grid. So what we do is that every time we sign a project, we make sure that those projects are new, so we are adding new capacity into the grid in such a way that our impact is larger than just buying renewable energy certificates off the grid. So you as a customer have the certitude that the power that is being matched to your consumption is actually additional, and it's new capacity that we bring into the grid.
Yeah.
So the last piece that we wanted to cover is that third pillar that we've been talking about, circular economy versus linear economy. The circular economy, as Chris explained, is this concept where products do not have an end of life and create waste. So the typical or the classic way of manufacturing and of using products is linear. You take resources from the earth, you produce a product, you use it, and you dispose it off. It goes to landfill, and that's the end of it. The way that circular economy works is that products do not have an end of life. Products, materials, components, they always keep the maximum value that they can at all times in a way that they re-enter the economy. And we believe that Google has a role to play to make that transition happen and to enable others to also play on the circular economy principles. So at Google and at the data center team, we're doing this at scale with the hardware that we deploy at the data centers. So there is a way to manage our hardware in a circular fashion. And we do it through these 4 steps. So first of all, we refurbish or remanufacture. So 19% of the servers that we deployed were actually refurbished. They were not new. So that's almost 20% of the fleet is refurbished material. Then we reuse or redistribute. What this means is that certain components of a server might fail, might get to a level of non-usability, right? So instead of changing the whole server, we would reuse and redistribute those resources and refurbish the certain pieces that are important for the server to extend its life. And that was up to 52%. We also maintain and prolong. And that is a very similar concept where 75% of the parts that we use at the data centers were actually refurbished. Those were not new. And the last pillar, which I really like, is the repurposing and recycling. Some of the components that we use at the data centers are highly technical. They need to have certain capabilities. And so at some point, those components are not going to be usable for the quality standards that we require and that our customers require. But some of those could be perfectly usable and completely fit for other purposes. So we safely sell those to the secondary market for others to use in a way that what could be waste for us is actually an input for other industries. And so everything that can't be refurbished or redistributed or maintained, we recycle it in a way that it re-enters the economy through a completely different product. And we make sure that we screen all of our suppliers for recycling and that we recycle products in the most environmentally responsible way.
And close the loop, right?
And close the loop.
So we talked about kind of the three areas, specifically within the context of Google Cloud, but generally I think what you as developers and IT decision makers and buyers of cloud computing technology should consider when you're thinking about sustainability in the context of cloud computing. And that's how efficient the data centers are that support all those products that you use and the platforms that you develop on, what kind of energy is going to power those data centers, and then finally, what are those providers doing in order to ensure that we are doing our best to reduce the amount of resources that we use. So what does that translate into for a customer or a developer or a business that wants to move to Google Cloud? And one of the biggest things is that you get to be carbon neutral if you use Google Cloud for your compute or the storage of your data. So because we've matched all of the energy, like Anna mentioned, that we use with renewable energy, and that renewable energy is what is matched with all of the compute and the storage electricity that we use to support our customers. If you move your compute workloads or you move your data storage to Google Cloud, the emissions associated with that usage is going to be zero.
Right, and I'm smiling because that's one of the programs that I'm running and I'm very proud of, because we have been carbon neutral for over 10 years now, and we do that through renewable energy, but also through high quality carbon offsets for those emissions that would still occur, even though the renewable energy purchases.
Yeah, I really like to think of this in kind of the lift and shift movement that's going on within the IT industry right now. So as I mentioned, like all organizations are in some stage of the process of digitalizing their business. They're going for a transformation or a revolution, or they're just trying to improve some of their current systems by moving those to the cloud. And I think when you traditionally think about that movement, you think about things like cost savings, performance improvements, efficiency improvements, or productivity. And those are great, and those will all come with the move to the cloud. But additionally, you should think about what you're doing to impact the environment in a positive way. And if you lift your workloads and move them to Google Cloud, you're definitely impacting the environment in a positive way relative to what you could probably do using your local grid and the energy you would source if you plugged in that server on premises.
Right, your net emissions could be zero, which, as we saw at the beginning, is crucial for climate change and maintaining that temperature rise below 2 degrees centigrade.
So the other thing we want to talk about, which we haven't mentioned too much, is G Suite. So lots of organizations use products like Gmail or Docs or Sheets in order to increase productivity and collaboration with their teams. And if you do that, you get all the benefits of what we're doing across our data centers from an energy and efficiency perspective. So businesses that have switched to the G Suite of products, they've reported reductions in their carbon emissions of 65 to 85%.
Right, and that is the result of all the programs that we discussed, our renewable energy purchases and our carbon neutrality, and this is the impact that those businesses saw in their footprint.
Yeah. So not only could you make your users more productive and more collaborative in their tools that they use on a daily basis, you can make them more sustainable in doing so.
Right.
And finally, this is kind of a technical concept, but I want to talk about less energy-intensive computational ability that's available in cloud computing. So likelihood you've heard of the increase and the importance of machine learning and artificial intelligence and how that's really revolutionizing how businesses operate and serve their customers today. One of the things that's unique to machine learning is their incredibly computational intensive workloads. Yep. And when something's really computationally intensive, it generally means that it needs a lot of energy to perform what it's doing. And at Google, we've been using machine learning in all of the products that serve our customers, like search and ads and Gmail for a long time. And in doing that, we use specialized hardware that's been designed to be as efficient as possible in using its energy. And the metrics that you use in order to measure that is something called teraflops per watt.
Yes.
So essentially, and you can always correct me if I'm wrong, but for every trillion operations of computation that these chips will perform, it's essentially per watt of energy that supports those trillion operations. Yeah. And you're trying to maximize that in order to use energy in the most efficient way possible. Well, we recently released, from a Google Cloud perspective, the availability of something called cloud TPUs. So TPU stands for Tensor Processing Unit, and it's similar to these machine learning design chips that we've been using at Google for a long time. So not only do you get 15 to 30x performance improvements in the computations that you're performing, but you also get more energy efficient computations when it comes to those really intensive machine learning workloads.
Right, and this links back to the fact that the most sustainable energy is the one that you don't use. And so at Google, we not only work on making our data centers efficient, but also the specific resources for certain products on cloud that are available to our customers to make that efficiency happen.
And I also think that this kind of segues into something that we haven't talked about a little bit, but we can kind of ad-lib about it right now, in that how do you use products available from Google and from other providers in order to make your business more sustainable, right? Access to something like this for machine learning workloads that is more energy efficient. Using our analytics tools in order to optimize your supply chain. There's other ways beyond just the resource use and the energy that we are sourcing in order to use products from Google and others to make you a more sustainable business.
Right.
So with those things in mind, what can you do? What can you ask of your technology provider in order to get a good idea of where they stand from a sustainability perspective? Right. So the first thing, and probably the most important thing, is asking them about their renewable energy commitments and targets. And you want to be specific in this, right? Because there's different ways that this could take form.
Right. There's a lot of ways that you can get to a certain percent of renewable energy. And we talked about buying renewable energy certificates right off the shelf. That is a good question to ask, whether the company that you're considering for your cloud business, is that a company that purchases new capacity, that bring new capacity into the grid, that are focused on additionality for their renewable energy purchases, or they're just buying off what is available already. There are different commitments. There are certain companies that would commit to X% renewable by 2020 or 2030 or 2050. It's up to you to judge what you think is possible today. And based on what we've done, I know it's challenging. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. We have a very capable and very strong team that has been sourcing renewables for the last 5 years. But it's something that can be done, and we've kind of went all the way through 100%.
Yeah, and this gets back to what it translates into you. If the answer is not 100% renewable energy, then the answer can also not be, when you move your compute there, zero carbon emissions, right?
Correct.
If they haven't met that, then chances are they won't be able to meet that zero carbon emissions.
They could have a carbon neutrality goal and use carbon offsets as an intermediary before you get to 100% renewable. But then there's also a lot of questions that you can ask about the carbon offsets that they're using. Are those high quality carbon offsets? Do they focus on additionality? What type of benefits the offsets are bringing, etc. So what is the carbon intensity of you moving to the cloud is definitely a question that I would ask, because that's going to affect your emission inventory, and not on your direct emissions, on your upstream supplier emissions. But those are also as important as your direct emissions.
Yeah, so that gets to how does your provider source renewable energy? Do they have carbon neutrality targets? We've kind of talked about what you want to listen for, like words like additionality and totally carbon neutral, and how they get there.
Right.
You also could ask your cloud provider, like, what else are they doing from an efficiency or driving sustainability programs perspective in order to minimize their environmental impact. And I think, some of the things that aren't directly related to renewable energy that Google does, like the refurbishment and the circular economy principles, like these are things that you could ask your cloud provider to get their perspective and how they approach those challenges.
Correct. A cloud provider uses a lot of resources, and that's not only energy. We've seen how we implement circular economy practices, and that also brings back to the goal that we have of zero waste to landfill. So at Google, we want zero waste to go to a landfill. A landfill for us means the last resource, that's resources that are trashed and they're never going to be used again. So we want to avoid that. And so companies do also have programs that minimize other environmental impacts and not only energy. And you should definitely ask for that.
Yeah. And then finally, this idea of making resources available to help you as a developer or a customer or a user of G Suite and Google Cloud Platform be more sustainable yourself. I think this is really interesting because it's not only can you use the products available from a cloud provider in order to, like I mentioned, like optimize your supply chain or do more energy efficient computations, but are there a network of customers who are trying to hit sustainability targets and they're incorporating their usage of the cloud into that process? Are they doing their own environmental report like many companies do now to talk about where they are within their sustainability goals?
Right.
Like, does your cloud provider provide the resources for that part of your business in order to measure how you're doing from a sustainability perspective?
Right. There's a lot of questions that you can ask, and definitely how does your cloud provider help you getting to your goals is a key one. Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about a few of the customers who kind of share this environmentally responsible ethos that Google has. So one customer, Lush, was super focused on increasing not only their productivity and the efficiency of the products that they were using on their cloud platform. They were focused on finding a cloud provider that aligned with being a more sustainable company and having less environmental impact. So not only did Lush move their operations, functionally from on-premises to Google Cloud Platform, but throughout the process, they increased their energy efficiency by, I believe it was like 30 or 40%. Yep. So they really believed that sustainability was an important part of the process when they moved to the cloud.
Yeah, and by moving to the Google Cloud, they also reached that goal of having their cloud run or matched by renewable energy.
Yeah. And Etsy, a very similar situation where as a company, they really focused on having a sustainable platform to support their customers. They have their own sustainability goals and sustainability teams that have kind of North Star metrics that they want to hit from a sustainability and environmental impact perspective. So, what was really interesting about Etsy is they included this in their evaluation criteria as they went through the process of evaluating a cloud. Yeah. Like not only are you looking at how fast VMs spin up on a platform, but you're looking at where does the provider source their energy, like what are the metrics that your provider is focused on in terms of sustainability, so they align with the goals.
Right, because Etsy also has their own sustainability goals and renewable energy goals. So having a cloud provider that would meet also their renewable energy standards was a key component for this.
Yeah, and a platform like Etsy, which is a digital commerce experience, a lot of the associated electricity environmental impact that goes into their business is going to be associated with that IT infrastructure. And finally, this is kind of a fun one. I really think it's interesting to see where companies who, or I should say where environmental impact or sustainability related projects or businesses are core to what they do. They're finding areas in the cloud in order to help them do that. Yep. So Makani is actually a Google X company where they fly these wind kites, hundreds of meters into the air. Because it turns out, as anyone who's been on a roof or hiked anything has experienced, that the wind blows harder the farther up you go. So you can actually generate wind energy far more efficiently if you can capture it high up in the air. So Makani uses Google Cloud Platform in order to analyze a bunch of geographic and environmental data and essentially find out where there are areas where they can tether their kites and generate the most wind power.
Yeah. It's funny really how they can find the more windy or the most efficiency with a cloud that is matched 100% with renewable energy.
Yeah. So to wrap this up, before we get to the Q&A, what are some things that we believe that you, as a potential user or a current user of Google Cloud, can do now? So I think the first thing is to really figure out what your own company, what their sustainability goals are. Because there's a lot of companies who share similar goals to Google in terms of renewable energy and environmental impact. There's two websites that I included on the slide. RE100 are a bunch of companies who have committed to 100% renewable energy. And we are still are a bunch of companies who have committed to still meeting the Paris Agreement requirements. Yep. So chances are your company may or may not have its own sustainability goals, and the IT infrastructure or the development or the apps that you build, that's going to have a part in that.
Totally correct, yes. And setting up your goals, if you haven't set those up yet, we totally encourage you to go through these resources and think what matters for you and how you can set those goals to make you move forward in this sustainability journey.
Yeah. Second thing, so later this week, Anna showed some of the images from it, but later this week we're going to be publishing a website where you can check out what the carbon intensity of your local grid is in the US. And then, of course, you'll see the difference if you come to Google Cloud, where we are essentially offsetting all of those emissions. So you can check out, essentially the difference between plugging in a server on premises versus coming to Google Cloud and what that will be.
Yeah, depending on where you are located, the carbon intensity of the grid is going to be completely different depending on the type of generation capacity that the grids have. So you will be able to see the differences between where you could be placing your own data center versus how the carbon intensity changes by moving to the cloud. It's pretty neat.
And then finally, work with your cloud provider, right?
Totally.
To see where IT should be focused on not only measuring sustainability, but where you can have an impact in future sustainability goals. And then if you want to, you can test out a carbon neutral free trial on Google Cloud by going to cloud.google.com/free. So that's a wrap. Thanks so much for listening to the content. We will be back in a minute for Q&A.
Thank you. All right, so we got really good questions from the audience. And what does it mean to match energy consumption versus what it means to be powered with renewable energy? And we've been trying to be very clear about the two differences, because matching our renewable energy consumption means that we buy enough renewable power to match every megawatt hour of consumption that we have. If we were to say that we're powered with renewable energy, that would mean that we're directly powered, that we have enough solar roof or we have some windmills that are directly hooked into our data centers. Yeah. And as we've discussed, that is currently, unfortunately, very hard to do or virtually impossible, because the wind blows when it blows and the sun shines when it shines. And we can just say, sorry, cloud customer, we can't serve you, the wind isn't blowing. That would never work. So there is a big difference between matching and being powered with. The ultimate goal is that we can be powered with 100% of the time renewable energy. And we'll get there eventually, but we're quite just not yet there yet because of the current available technologies and how the grid works. Yeah. The last question that we got was, what makes carbon offsets high quality, and why we talk always about Google's high quality carbon offsets? And again, this is a program that I run, so I'm very proud of it. High quality for us means highly additional. The project wouldn't have happened hadn't it been for the offsets. And the reason behind is, we are claiming that we're carbon neutral, it means that we got the reduction from somewhere else. If that reduction had happened anyway, then it's not additional. We can't claim carbon neutrality. So in evaluating all of our carbon offset projects, I literally drive to every single project that we have, and I evaluate the project, the counterparts, the project developers, et cetera, to make sure that the projects are run at the highest quality, that those companies are good stewards for the environment, et cetera, and they're not causing any harm. So we are very proud of our 40+ projects that we partner with to obtain these high quality carbon offsets that enable us to be carbon neutral for our operations.
Yeah, it's fantastic. All right, so thank you so much for your time. We really had a lot of fun talking about sustainability with you. Stay tuned for the next session. So it's an amazing session with Global Fishing Watch, and they're going to talk about how they use Google Cloud Platform to actually prevent overfishing.
Right, thank you so much.
Yeah.